The claim now is that Fox's primetime hosts endorsed Trump's voting fraud claims, even though they privately admitted they did not believe them, because they were afraid that they would lose their audience to OAN or Newsmax if they did not do so. Now, beyond the fact that, as we're about to show you, nobody can point to a single Tucker Carlson segment or a Laura Ingraham segment from late 2020 or early 2021 where they endorsed this election fraud theory, namely the entire allegation central to this claim can't be proven. In fact, Tucker Carlson vehemently condemned those who are making the claim of election fraud without evidence, as we're about to show you. Liberal outlets such as CNN back then in late 2020 and 2021 were making the exact opposite claim about Fox. Namely, they were gloating about the fact that Fox was losing their audience due to their refusal of late-night hosts to endorse Trump's election fraud claims. Here was CNN back then saying exactly the opposite of what they're saying now. Namely, that Fox's integrity was starting to destroy their ratings. Quote, Fox News is taking action to stave off newfound competition from Newsmax TV. Producers on some Fox programs have been told to monitor Newsmax's guest bookings and throw some sand in Newsmax's gears by encouraging guests to appear on both channels to stop saying yes to the upstart. Up until Election Day, Newsmax barely had a pulse on Nielsen's TV ratings reports, which showed that the channel only averaged 34,000 viewers at any given time in August and September. A slight uptick in October became a groundswell of viewership after November 3rd. One of the obvious causes was Fox's projection that President Trump would lose the state of Arizona, drastically narrowing his path to re-election, and Newsmax criticized Fox and gave viewers false hope about Trump's chances. This tactic continued when Fox and all the other major networks called the election for President-elect Biden on November 7th. Newsmax insisted that the race wasn't over and that the major networks were acting irresponsibly, where in fact Newsmax is the irrational actor. A subset of the Fox audience flocked to Newsmax for shows that hype voter fraud allegations and harangue the rest of the media. In other words, at the time they were mocking Fox for losing their audience to Newsmax and OAN as a result of the refusal of Fox hosts to tell many of their viewers what they wanted to hear, namely that the real winner of the 2020 election was Donald Trump, and that the only reason why it appeared that Joe Biden won was due to election fraud. Everybody knows who watched Fox during this period that the primetime hosts of Fox News, Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and Sean Hannity, were not endorsing Donald Trump's claims of election fraud. There were hosts on Fox News, like Lou Dobbs, who got fired for it, and Judge Jeanine, and Maria Bartoma, who did endorse those claims, but the Fox primetime hosts did not. And that's why every single one of these news reports that I just read you that is implicitly asserting or even explicitly claiming that Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham endorsed and supported and told their viewers was valid Trump's election fraud claims cannot point to a single instance in which they did that. Because at the heart of this theory is a fabrication. The fabrication being that these Fox hosts were endorsing a theory of voter fraud that they secretly repudiated. In the case of Tucker Carlson, he didn't just secretly repudiate the election fraud claims, he went on the air and publicly did so in a particular episode that I remember because it caused enormous amounts of rage against Tucker Carlson from the Fox audience. In other words, Tucker Carlson went on the air and did a segment that he knew would anger his own audience, and he did it anyway, something which not a single host of CNN or MSNBC can ever point to themselves doing. Namely, going on the air and scolding their audience for believing things that were untrue, or for buying into the conspiracy theories of the Democratic Party, even though there was no evidence for it. All of these journalists are demanding of Fox hosts that they do something that those journalists themselves never have the courage to do, which is tell their viewers something they don't want to hear. But that is something that Tucker Carlson did. So while nobody can point to him going on the air at this time and endorsing the idea that this election was won by Joe Biden due to fraud, we can watch this segment, as I'm about to show you, in which he did exactly the opposite.
Brings us to the bombshell at the center of today's press conference. That was delivered by former prosecutor Sidney Powell, who has also served as General Mike Flynn's lawyer. For more than a week, Powell has been all over conservative media with the following story. This election was stolen by a collection of international leftists who manipulated vote tabulating software in order to flip millions of votes from Donald Trump to Joe Biden. The other day on television, Powell said of Trump that when the fraud is finally uncovered, quote, "I think we'll find he had at least 80 million votes." In other words, rigged software stole about 7 million votes in this election. Here's some of what Powell said today about the software.
One of its most characteristic features is its ability to flip votes. It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm that had been plugged into the system. And that's what caused them to have to shut down in the states they shut down in.
That was a few hours ago, but Sidney Powell has been saying similar things for days. On Sunday night, we texted her after watching one of her segments. What Powell was describing would amount to the single greatest crime in American history. Millions of votes stolen in a day. Democracy destroyed. The end of our centuries-old system of self-government. Not a small thing.
Now, let me just stop there. You can see the tenor of this segment, which is that Tucker Carlson is saying this theory is a theory that Sidney Powell is endorsing. She is all over conservative media making these claims. He then goes on to say, if she's right in what she's saying, this would be the single greatest story, the single most important story, the gravest crime ever committed in American political history. You notice what he is not doing, very clearly not doing, endorsing those claims himself. He continues to distance himself from those claims by saying these are claims that she believes. These are claims that she is asserting. And he then goes on to explain that if this were true, this would be the biggest story in all of American history. Now let's hear the rest.
Now, to be perfectly clear, we did not dismiss any of it. We don't dismiss anything anymore, particularly when it's related to technology. We've talked to too many Silicon Valley whistleblowers. We've seen too much. After 4 years, this may be the single most open-minded show on television. We literally do UFO segments, not because we're crazy or even been interested in the subject, but because there is evidence that UFOs are real and everyone lies about it. There's evidence that a lot of things that responsible people used to dismiss out of hand as ridiculous are in fact real. And we don't care who mocks it. The louder the Yale Political Science Department and the staff of the Atlantic magazine scream, "conspiracy theory," the more interested we tend to be. It's usually a sign you're over the target. A lot of people with impressive-sounding credentials in this country are frauds. They have no idea what they're doing. They're children posing as authorities, and when they're caught, they lie, and then they blame you for it. We see that every day. It's the central theme of this show, and will continue to be. So that's a long way of saying we took Sidney Powell seriously. We had no intention of fighting with her. We've always respected her work. We simply wanted to see the details. How could you not want to see them? So we invited Sidney Powell on this show. We would have given her the whole hour. We would have given her the entire week, actually, and listened quietly the whole time at rapt attention. That's a big story. But she never sent us any evidence, despite a lot of requests, polite requests, not a page. When we kept pressing, she got angry and told us to stop contacting her. When we checked with others around the Trump campaign, people in positions of authority, they told us Powell has never given them any evidence either, nor did she provide any today at the press conference. Powell did say that electronic voting is dangerous, and she's right. We're with her there. But she never demonstrated that a single actual vote was moved illegitimately by software from one candidate to another.
Okay. He just got done saying over and over and over that not only did Sidney Powell refuse to provide evidence in support of her theory that Donald Trump is the real winner of the election and Biden won only because millions of votes had been switched. He told his audience she has never provided that evidence to anyone. He said, we would love to have her on our show. We would give her the entire night, in fact, the entire week, because if she has evidence, we would want to hear it. But clearly, she doesn't have that evidence because she refuses to show it to anybody when asked. Now, I'm going to show you the last 51 seconds of this segment. But this was at the peak of this controversy. It was November 19th, 2.5 weeks after the election, while Trump was going around every day accusing the Biden campaign of having stolen the election through voting fraud and using Sidney Powell as the primary spokesperson for that theory. I'm asking you to leave aside for the moment your view of whether or not this is true or not. That's not relevant for the current moment. What I am instead interrogating is whether or not the narrative that has been universally adopted by the media, that Tucker Carlson has no journalistic credibility because while he was privately expressing skepticism about the voting election theory, the voting fraud theory, he went on his show and endorsed it. I'm asking you to look at what he actually said and ask yourself if that is even viable. If anybody who has an iota of integrity could actually maintain that claim, that Tucker Carlson went on the air and told his viewers that the election fraud theory was true, when I just showed you 3 minutes of him carefully, though emphatically, doing exactly the opposite, making clear that there's no evidence at all for that claim. Let's watch the rest.
Not one. So why are we telling you this? We're telling you this because it's true. And in the end, that's all that matters, the truth. It's our only hope. It's our best defense. And it's how we're different from them. We care what's true, and we know you care too. That's why we told you. Maybe Sidney Powell will come forward soon with details on exactly how this happened and precisely who did it. Maybe she will. We are certainly hopeful that she will. What happened with the vote counting this month, and at the polling places in Detroit, and the polling places in Philadelphia, and so much else, actually matters. It matters no matter who you voted for. It matters whether or not you think this election is already over. Until we know the answers to those questions conclusively and we can agree on them, this country will not be united.
The whole title of the segment, as you see right here on the bottom of the screen, was voter fraud, separating fact from fiction. And what he told his viewers is, look, you may feel really strongly about this. You may want this to be true. You may even believe that it's true. But what separates us from them, meaning the liberal outlets that will lie at the drop of a hat and not apologize when they get caught, like has happened so many times just in the last 3 weeks alone, what separates us from them is that we will not tell you things that we know you want to hear if we don't believe that they're true because there's no evidence for them. And in this case, meaning the case that Sidney Powell is making, we will not tell you it's true because we have not seen evidence for it despite repeatedly asking. And as I said before showing you this clip, at the time that all of this was happening, the corporate media, the liberal parts of it, CNN, NBC News, the networks, the New York Times, the Washington Post, were saying the exact opposite of what they're trying to convince you of now. They were mocking Fox for losing their audience, for not endorsing these theories, because it was true that their main hosts were in fact not endorsing these theories. To the extent they were opining them at all, they were telling their audience there was no evidence for them, as I just showed you. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update. Catch our full shows for free, live weekdays at 7 p.m. Eastern on Rumble, and join our locals community at greenwald.locals.com for all of my written journalism, exclusive after-show Q&As, and more.